Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Build Your Copywriting Business podcast. Hey there, Kate.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Kate, this is a two-parter.
It
We're
is.
doing a two-part.
This
I was
is
going to
part
say
one.
two-part episode, but this is part one of a two-part arc.
2 episodes?
Story arc. Anyway, part one of a two-parter because we had so much content that we did not want to subject you to an hour and a half podcast episode or hour and a half video. I don't know about you, Kate, but I love podcasts. But when I download one and it's like an hour and a half episode, I go, oh,
it's a big commitment.
It's a big
commitment. There's a show I want to watch on Netflix, and each episode is an hour long, and it's a commitment.
Isn't that funny? The difference between like 52 minutes and an hour is like, well, now wait a minute here.
Yeah.
Which is also not to say
I can't watch a movie every single day.
Exactly. Well, I absolutely would. I'll sit down and watch like 3 episodes, but whoa.
It's true. This is true.
It's all mind games.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I can watch 5 episodes of a 30-minute show, but give me a 2.5-hour movie and suddenly that feels
impossible.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Brains.
So we are doing you that favor of not making you listen to us for an hour and a half, even if you do it on double speed.
It's still commitment on double speed.
Yeah, exactly.
We sound real fast on double speed.
We already talk fast. Yes. NPR, you need to listen to it on double speed. The topic of these two of our story arc is the top myths and misconceptions about copywriting. And the funny thing is we were actually looking at what we have posted online, that kind of thing. And I think we originally started with 6, and then it was 9, and then we've been in this
14.
business for quite a while. We've worked with nearly 12,000 students at this point. We've come across a lot of them. So you're going to get 7 of them in this first episode, 7 of them in the second episode, in no particular order. They are all very common, very prevalent myths that we are going to spend these next 2 episodes debunk. Yeah, bust that myth right in the kisser. I don't know. That seems too violent. Just oust it. Oust that myth.
Oust that myth. Yes.
Myth ousting.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like jousting. Yeah.
Mousting.
Usually we record these in the afternoon. You could, I don't know, first thing in the morning, we're real on a roll.
Real punchy. Coffee kicked in. Okay, let's dig in.
Start with number 1. I was going to say, and we're going to go through these, I wouldn't say rapid fire, but pretty quickly. So if you have additional questions, please send us any additional questions, thoughts, concerns, comment on Instagram, comment on YouTube. We read it all. We read them all, and we will respond. So first myth is if you can write anything, including content, blog writing, all of that sort of thing, you can write copy. So,
au contraire
is right. If you are good at writing, though, of course you can become a copywriter. You have that's a perfect trait and a perfect way to start and get into the field. You have to like writing if you're going to be a copywriter. You have to have some sort of natural affinity for writing. But copywriting, as many of you know, is a different kind of writing than the writing that most of us are used to. And so therefore it does require a certain level of training. You need to understand features versus benefits. You need to understand what a call to action is. You need to understand what copy is needed for an email versus a sales page versus a banner ad, and how much copy can even fit on a banner ad, which, as many CCA students know, as an exercise, that is a fun, challenging exercise in brevity and being very concise and economical with your word choices and your ideas and concepts, and really winnowing it down to one specific concept versus trying to pack everything in there. And I think that's where really one of the biggest differences between blog writing and copywriting is that blog writing, you don't have to be should you be economical in your word choices? Yes. Do you have to be? Absolutely not. I think there's a lot of room for fluff and fat and just more space to say a lot and be long-winded and not have to be judicious with what you're putting out there, versus copywriting requires a lot of sometimes self-control, honestly, to just say, you know what, this is not fitting here, and this can fit somewhere else, or this is not right for the project, and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's half writing, half editing, right?
At least,
yeah. The example I always give is, well, a couple of examples, but I'm a good driver, but that does not mean that I'm qualified to be a race car driver, right? And I can bake a cake, but that does not make me qualified to be a patisserie chef. Actually, I don't know, do cakes count as patisserie?
I don't know. It's a field we clearly know nothing about.
You would need to
know. We're not
qualified.
We're not qualified to bake a loaf of bread.
But it is, like you were saying, Kate, a love for writing, a natural affinity for writing. If you're the kind of person who people are always saying, oh my God, you're such a good writer, or they're saying, hey, can you take a look at this email for me? Or can you help me write my resume? Or can you take a look at this email before I send it to my boss? Been there many a time. I've even written breakup emails for friends.
Oh.
That's a fun project. But if you have that natural ability, great. You're in a great place to get started. But
Mhm.
you do need that additional training in order to do it professionally. Because don't forget, it's not just, well, I'm going to write copy, but you're charging for this. And in order to justify charging for it, you have to be an expert. You need to know how to do it before you say to a client, yeah, I can absolutely do that for you. Otherwise, it's just very disingenuous.
Mhm. The license analogy is real good. I'm switching states licenses, and man, there's a lot of different types of licenses you can apply for, but you need certain training for, like truck driving and motorcycle driving.
Mm-hmm.
Good
Mm-hmm.
analogy. I like
Yeah.
it. Myth numero dos. It's hard to find copywriting work. This comes up so much. I think it came up the other day. Someone was saying, oh, this is going to be so hard. It's hard to find normal jobs. Isn't it 10 times as hard to find copywriting work because copywriting feels even more, I don't know what the thought line of thought was, but
I think I think that people think that, number one, because it's something they want so much. It's something they're
mm,
excited about now, and it's sometimes when we want something even more, we set up barriers. And but number one, it's no harder, thumbs up, no harder to find copywriting work than it is to find any other kind of work. And in fact, I would say in a lot of ways it's easier. But the
mhm,
problem is where people are looking for that work, right?
mhm. Well, not having a system to find that work. I think people are looking for work on the quote unquote easy button, if you will, with the Upworks and the Fivers, and applying on the easy apply on
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn. And none of these tactics work for, quite frankly, forget copywriting. Those platforms are a race to who's going to pay the least amount for the best possible work that they can get, whether it's copywriting, whether it's design work, whatever it is. And so you're competing with tons and tons and tons of other people for peanuts. And
Yeah.
it's not a good platform. It's great for clients who want a decent level, I say decent level of work for a very low rate, but
Passable,
it's,
maybe.
yeah, pass, that's a good word. Not great for the service providers that are on these sites.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing with the easy apply. You're getting lost in a sea of other applicants. There's no way for you to stand out. So really it's hard if you don't have a system and don't know how to go about finding well-paying work. And there's plenty of that well-paying work out there.
Well, the truth is that the vast majority of copywriting work never ends up on these sites,
Mm-hmm.
right? Projects never end up on Indeed or LinkedIn or, Fiverr or all
Even
those other
yeah,
ones.
all those, yeah.
It doesn't end up there. Um, the when people have projects, they look internally, they look to source from other, but there is a way to tap into that, though. You just can't, when you're sitting and waiting for people to post jobs, you're putting the control in somebody else's hands, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's passive. And I get it, because that's how we were all taught, that's how you find a job, right? You go on LinkedIn, you go on Indeed. It used to be you go on Monster and that kind of thing, and you
Mm-hmm.
look and see what's posted, and then you apply, and then but it's completely, I mean, yes, once you apply, it's passive anymore, but waiting for those things to come is passive. But there are 100 times, if not 1,000 times more projects out there. Oh, that's too low.
I just,
Thousands and thousands of times more projects out there waiting for you to be worked on within companies that they're just not posting it to the world. And maybe
mm-hmm.
they're not posting it yet, or maybe it's, but you can tap into that so that you are the person that they go to before they even think about posting it, or before they even think about saying, hey, does anybody know a copywriter? Who have we worked with in the past? But you can't sit and if you're sitting and waiting passively, then sure, it might look like there's not a lot out there, but there absolutely is. There's a massive amount of work. I love it when we talk to students who are like, I can't believe how much work is out there. Because I feel like we can say it, but
Once you
sometimes you have
experience
to
it,
experience it
yeah.
yourself.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I get it. And we'll link to I think 2 episodes. We did one certainly on just the amount of opportunity there is for copywriters. And when I always forget the number, but there's hundreds of thousands of companies that are created every month, never mind the millions that are already in existence, plus the millions of nonprofits and all of that sort of thing.
And when we
And
say millions, I know it sounds like we are exaggerating,
we're
but
not.
it's
Yeah.
not. That number is
Fact
it's
check us.
538,000
Yeah,
new
a month,
companies are
right?
started every month, and I believe that's just in the U.S.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a
Yes.
massive amount. Massive
Massive
amount.
amount. And then we also did a 3-part series. If you are applying, if you're looking for full-time jobs, not freelance work, there's still certain steps you want to take to stand out from the rest of the applicants. And so starting with part 1, I think is maybe the most important part of that 3-part series of landing an interview and acing your interview with your employer, because it all starts with how you actually apply. And I think people start worrying about interviews before they even get the interview. So step 1 really is not hitting the easy apply. And we have a whole episode on what to do instead of hitting that easy apply to make sure you get in someone's inbox in the first place and have a chance at that interview. And then you can kind of worry about what questions you need to prep for that interview to land the work ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay. Next myth. You need to know someone to get a job. I used to hear this a lot. Like, I think it's maybe I'm just
It's
not
still a
hearing it from the
common
same
thing
people as
too.
many.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the idea of like, oh, if you want to get in the door, you need to know somebody. If you want to get
It's
a
all
shot,
about who you know.
it's all about who you know. And I mean, first, yes, that's
Yes.
helpful. Certainly.
Yeah.
If you know a creative director at an agency, then yeah, of course, it's going to be a little bit easier. But you don't have to know someone in order to get a job.
Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes too, we think, oh, I have to know someone that's at an agency or we don't think of our network more broadly. And you never know by telling people in your network what you're doing, that you are a copywriter, what may come of that, because there might be someone who's at a company and you didn't realize that they are working with a copywriter, whether internally or on a freelance basis. And so put yourself out there to your network first and foremost. But even if you're say, you know what, Nicki and Kate, I haven't had a job in 10 years. I'm getting back into the workforce. And there's no one I know that I can reach out and connect with. I don't have a LinkedIn profile. I don't even know where I'd begin with people I know. Totally fine. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Even if you don't know anyone, which I know is impossible, there are people you have to know. You have a mail. Everyone has a mailman. There's someone
Or
you
mail
know.
woman, mail carrier.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to outreach for copywriting projects. Doesn't have to start with people you know by any means.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I think the you need to know someone to get a job. I think I would most often hear this when it'd be like, well, I applied for this job and I couldn't get into it. You need to know somebody. And I would say, all right, well, how did you, what have you prepared to show your copywriting skills? And then it would be like, well, I just like, I'm a good writer, kind of getting back to that. Like, well, you have to demonstrate that you know how to write copy. The thing is that one of the great things is that copywriting is a merit-based career. It doesn't matter. And we'll get into this a little bit more, but like, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter any of these other factors. If you can demonstrate that you can write great copy, people are going to be interested in talking to you and potentially hiring you. So yes, if you know someone, absolutely it helps. But if you don't, and you put together a solid portfolio, you've demonstrated what you bring to the table, and you have shown your great samples, again, whether they be work you've been paid for, or maybe it's spec work, and you in the descriptions you talk about why you made the choices that you did, and so it gives some insight into people are going to want to talk to you. That is the mark of a professional. And yes, it does help to know people, but quite frankly, if it's you and you have this portfolio and you're demonstrating that you have skills, and there's someone else who, I don't know, knows the creative director, is a friend of the creative director, you've got a better shot because you have a portfolio.
Mm-hmm. Myth number 4. Copywriters work long hours. This one, I feel like it comes from maybe the ad agency world. If you watch Mad Men, maybe that's where this is coming from. And certainly there are jobs and roles that maybe you're working long hours, but I think it's more of a choice when it comes to copywriting and how and where you decide to take your career. I've worked at an ad agency, and I think I never stayed there late ever, not once when I was there. Was there a team that decided for a pitch we were pitching an outdoor organization and they decided to camp out in the office as part of the pitch, but that was a choice and not everyone had to do it. Is really cool.
That is so
It was
fun.
really fun. Yeah. And so they decided, we're going to get all our camp mugs and we're going to sit around and
Yeah.
I forget if we ended up landing the client or not from that, but that was a choice. And that was a team deciding we're going to do this and this is going to be super fun. And it sure was. Yeah. But on a day-to-day basis, that never happened. And certainly as a freelancer, have there been days where I've stayed up super late and worked long hours? Yeah, but that was because it was my choice. Guess who's to blame? This girl.
That girl.
Because maybe I decided to go out to lunch with a friend and I was like, you know what, this project is due, and so I'm going to stay up extra late to get this done. Or, I have something I want to do tomorrow. This actually happened the other day. My birthday was yesterday, and I knew I was going to go out to dinner, so I said, you know what, the day before, I'm going to spend a little extra time so that come dinner time, I'm ready to go, and I feel good, and work's in a very good place so that I can extra enjoy this. So it's all choice, and so maybe there are days you end up working long hours because you've decided to go out with a friend, or maybe you just didn't plan well. And yes, the deadline's coming up and you have to hit that deadline because you can't miss that deadline.
Or you said yes to too many clients.
Oh, yes. Yep. We have an episode on that. Yep. That happens a lot more than you would think. And so I would say 99% of the time working long hours is all a choice versus imposed on you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think too, there's the other side of this of, if you're looking at Upwork or you're looking at some of these where people are trying to get people to write copy for peanuts, well, I am going to have to work long hours. If I'm going to be a copywriter, I'm going to get paid $15 an hour. Holy man, you should not be getting paid $15 an hour as a copywriter. As a trained copywriter, if you're starting out, you should be looking at starting at $50 an hour, if not more. So if you're making $50 an hour and you're working 40 hours a week, if you want to be working 40 hours a week, and of course you're not writing the whole time, more on that in a moment too. But if you're working 40 hours a week and you are working 50 weeks a year, we're looking in the six figures there. So, and if you want to make less than six figures, great. And, or as you increase your rate, you can work less. Or anyway, my point is that if you're thinking, well, I have to work long hours to make these numbers work, to make a living as a writer, absolutely not. Yes, content writers tend to make a whole lot less. Copywriters is back to that point number one. It is a skilled career, and it also benefits our client, directly benefits our client, and people will pay us well for that. Are there people who want to pay us peanuts? Yeah, of course. There are always people who want to pay peanuts. Just don't work with them. But you don't have to work long hours in order to make an excellent income. We have copywriters that we work with who are working 20 hours a week and hitting 5 figures a month, hitting $10,000 a month. So you don't need to work long hours to make a good living either.
Myth number 5, you need to be clever or funny to be a copywriter, which this comes up all the time. I think there's this perception that, maybe you see advertisements out in the world that are clever and funny. I feel like, especially I'm thinking during the Super Bowl and big commercials like that they've done some that are certainly over the top and you're like, who approved this? And then some that you're like, oh, wow, that's so funny. That's so clever. I'm going to be talking about that. Yeah. But so that's true. But I think there's so much more work that we don't see on a day-to-day basis that it doesn't involve any sort of humor or wit or puns or being clever in any way. I think there's a cleverness too. I think the word maybe, I think of being clever as I'm going to take this creative brief that I have for my client. What is their tone of voice? What is the purpose of this project? What is the call to action? Where do I need to go? And I think there's a cleverness in being able to solve that. It's almost like a puzzle that you're solving of, okay, here's the pieces and what I need to do and what do I create? But in terms of the writing itself having a wit or a cleverness to it, I think I've written maybe in my entire, I don't know where I'm at, 15 years at this point
Mm-hmm.
of copywriting experience. And I've maybe had one client that had any sort of just kind of tongue-in-cheek tone to their voice.
Mm-hmm.
And so much more work out there is, I don't even want to say boring, but so much of it is being straightforward and clear with your communication and getting your message across. And that takes a lot of what we were saying earlier of being very economical with your word choices and very judicious with what's coming into your final copy.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot more restraint in the writing versus any sort of humor.
And insight too, right?
Yes,
Insight
yes.
into the target audience. And that, yeah, I agree. I have had the pleasure of working maybe a handful of clients where they wanted some humor, but just think about it. The vast majority of companies, their brand voice is not funny or not clever, or it's not their purpose. It doesn't serve their needs to be funny or clever. Certainly there are some, and like you said, Kate, I think we tend to see them in the mass media, but your software company downtown probably doesn't have a funny voice, or the restaurant a couple blocks over doesn't need a funny tone. There are some, and you will come across them, and if you have the opportunity to work on that and that's what you like, great. You're going to love those samples. Maybe those are going to be some of your favorite pieces in your portfolio. I know for me, I was actually just the other night, I was chuckling over some copy that I'd written. Here we go. Let's go on a tangent. I did work for an agency, and it was promotional. I think it was posters and just signage and ads for an eco-friendly housing development or housing neighborhood that was being built, and it was built on like cranberry bogs, and they were like, all right, just have some fun with it. And so there were lines like, the only loons in your old neighborhood were the Wilsons. Like, I still did it. I'm like, I'm so proud of myself for that line. But that said, this is out of a 20-year career, right? And I have worked with, I don't even know how many clients, dozens and dozens and dozens of clients. Do I still remember those, and do I still love them? And do they hold a special place in my heart? Yes, absolutely. Clearly, I'm making you all listen to me as I say my copy out loud, but it's not a prevalent part of copywriting. So if you like it, yes, absolutely, you will be able to find clients that are looking for funny or clever copy. Yes. And you can also, if you like to do that kind of work, then pitch clients who have that kind of brand voice. If you're like, I want to try that. I think it'd be fun to write for them. Pitch clients who have that brand voice. But if that's not your style, if you're like, I think that's just not, I don't think in that way, or maybe that feels like too much pressure, then great. Don't pitch those kind of clients. The great thing about when you're pitching clients is that you kind of get a sense for who they are well before you pitch them, and you can make that choice.
Yeah. You're making me think of, I had a whole bunch of guacamole puns. I've got to find, there's somewhere in my portfolio, I'm sure, like guac and roll, and I don't know what the others were, but we did a partnership with Chipotle, and
fun.
Delightful.
Yes.
But that was, I mean, I would say, because I do think, to your point, that when you said pressure, I was like, like I feel that with some of these, but it's like an excitement though of flexing that muscle that you don't often get to flex, and pushing yourself outside a comfort zone of like, okay, on a day-to-day basis, I'm, writing copy, and it's a lot, quote unquote, easier, I think. And so I think sometimes if you have the opportunity, don't be afraid to, it maybe feel like a challenge, but it'll feel so good once you've done it. And then you know that you can do it. And just budget more time in your project pricing for the fact that you might need more time for it.
Yeah. It's like exercising, right? It's like, I think I've done all I can do, and that we still have to do more. When we were years ago, when I was working at Marshall's, they had the Marshall's copywriter. The agency, because they would do an external agency to come up with kind of the bigger overall theme, and then we would execute on it within the company. Even though I have lots of thoughts about that, that's a different episode. But the campaign's theme was Marshall's Laws, which I was like, hey, it sounds a lot like martial law. Does anybody else have a problem with that?
Yeah.
They're like, no, the agency's great. It was just great until like 6 months in. There was one of the countries that we had stores in declared martial law. Anyway, then it became a little bit more complicated. But the concept of Marshall's Laws was like Murphy's Laws. And so it was cute, cute lines like Father's Day one was get lots of great gifts for dad for just a few bucks a pop. Which
Pop.
and actually, I came up with that. I said that in a meeting and with the agency, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, that's so good. We didn't think of that." I'm like, "Yeah, well, thank you." But the interesting thing about that was I would come up with a dozen, and then the creative director would be like, "Great, awesome, give me a dozen more," and I would go, and I would, come up with another dozen. And of course, to get a dozen, you have to do like 50 or 60 and then cull it down to go, all right, these are solid ones. And I would bring them through and he would go, great ones. Give me another dozen. So there is that like, challenging yourself because and there's so many times that things we think they're funny and they're not funny. They don't come across as funny. And I realize we're going off on a big tangent here. We'll get to the next one. But just a little insight into what it's actually like to be writing quote unquote, you can always funny, improve.
Clever. I think it's there's always room to grow. Myth number 6, copywriting bosses are divas jerks, which, speaking of that creative director that pushed you to do more, I wouldn't call them a diva or a jerk, but maybe you feel that way sometimes. I don't know. I've never had a diva or jerk boss.
I think this might go back to that kind of like the madman advertising industry too. Like surprise, we also don't drink 3 martinis at lunch. Wow. Most days.
Speak for yourself.
Maybe today. The thing is too is that you will have jerks as bosses in any field, right? Like unfortunately, I feel like that's come down a lot more. I think bosses used to have a lot more leeway to just do whatever they wanted to, but now nobody wants to have to deal with that. So HR will step in often, hopefully. But that could happen in any industry. So is it possible? Certainly. And I think there is that idea of like, well, someone who's creative is just, they can't be nailed down and they just do whatever they want to do. And you just have to, again, I think that might have been a little bit more true 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, certainly. But now, I mean, no more so than in any other industry. And just like in any other industry, you also, if you have a problem with your boss, talk to HR, or because you're a copywriter and you know how to pitch, get out of there, go find another job, go freelance until you find another job if you want to be on staff. Yeah. It's very easy to forget that we're dealing with humans instead of ideal clients, ideal bosses, all that kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. Last myth for this episode.
And you alluded to this.
I did allude to this. Good job, me. The myth is that copywriters spend all day writing. Oh my goodness.
Thank God no.
Thank God that's not the case. I don't think I have the brain power to spend 8 hours a day writing. I don't know if anybody has the brain power to spend 8 hours a day writing.
Write well 8 hours a day. I could do it, but it'd be suffer by the end for sure.
Yeah. Actual writing is really only a portion of what we do as copywriters. I mean, yes, we already said there's writing and there's editing, but also there's all kinds of other things. There's brainstorming, there's concepting, there's talking with your clients and getting a good sense of what the project is all about. If you're working with designers, there's collaborating with designers. There's all kinds of, and also too, just to run your business, you're sending out pitches. You are
invoicing to get paid.
Invoicing to get paid, following up with previous clients, maybe making suggestions to previous clients, but connecting with other people. The actual writing is, I mean, I'm not going to give you a prescription for how many hours a day you're writing, but it's only a portion of what you're doing. And again, thank goodness it's not the whole day. I don't think anybody has the ability to be on and good like that for 8 hours a day or more than that.
Yeah, it's probably very day to day for you. Maybe some days you're writing 4 hours. Maybe some days you have to push out 6 and you come back the next day and do a heavy editing round because you spent too much time writing the day before and it wasn't your tip top best work.
Yeah. Well, and too, I find it helpful to write in like littler sprints, sit down, write for 20, 25 minutes, a half hour, and then get up and take a break and go do something else.
Yeah,
if I
same.
possibly can. There are times too when it's a longer project where I'm like, all right, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to power through for a couple hours, and then I'm going to edit afterwards. But I find it best for myself to I've got that focus for about 25 minutes, 30 minutes where I can really give it my best. And then my brain goes, okay, why don't you take a break there, kid? You take a moment. So even even if you're writing for several hours a day, it is likely not consecutive. It's not like you sit down at your desk and then you're just hands on the keyboard until 1:00 when you let yourself take a break for lunch. We're creative people, right? Copywriting is both strategic, absolutely, also creative. And you can't combine the two of those without, or I should say, you can't combine the two of those and also expect to power through and be perfectly effective all the way through your day. Okay, so 7 solid myths, which maybe some of them you were thinking yourself, consider them busted. What did I say earlier? Ousted the myth, busted, jousted.
Maybe you still believe them until you experience for yourself, but hopefully this plants a seed of curiosity.
Exactly. But great news, 7 more seeds of curiosity to come in the next episode. So of course, if you have not already, follow us, like us, subscribe to us,
do all the verbs,
get our faces on t-shirts. No, the whatever channel you're on, make sure that to follow or subscribe to make sure that you don't miss the next episode. And of course, if you are enjoying these episodes and you felt compelled to leave a review or leave a comment or something along those lines, we always appreciate it. So thank you. And with that, we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Bye, everybody. Like what you heard? Hit subscribe so you never miss a video. And if you're ready to take the first step toward becoming a copywriter yourself, sign up for a free video training right here.